Clayton Mercer heard the child crying before he saw the smoke. January wind cut through his wool coat like broken glass, and his horse's breath froze midair as they climbed the last ridge to Two Creeks Ranch. He'd paid $8,000 cash for this property 3 months back, rode off to Chicago to sell cattle, and left the place locked up tight. Empty, or so he'd figured. But smoke rose from the chimney now, and snowdrifts that should have blocked the door had been cleared away by human hands. The sobbing got louder as he dismounted. His boots crunched through ice, and he caught the smell of wood smoke mixing with something medicinal, carbolic acid maybe, the kind Doc Pike used for lung trouble. He pushed open the door. A little girl knelt beside a woman on a makeshift bed of flour sacks. The child's eyes went wide with fear. "Please don't call the law, mister. Mama's too sick to move." Behind him in the snow, boot prints led toward the house. Someone else had been watching. Clayton stood in the doorway, cold air at his back and firelight warming his face. The woman on the bed couldn't have been more than 30, but consumption had aged her. Blood spotted the handkerchief clutched in her pale hand. Her breathing came shallow and quick. The girl, 9, maybe 10, positioned herself between Clayton and her mother like a guard dog half the size of what it was protecting. "How long you been here?" Clayton asked, keeping his voice low. 3 weeks. The girl's chin lifted. "But we ain't thieves. Found the place empty and the door unlocked. Mama couldn't walk no further." Clayton's eyes traveled the room. Someone had scrubbed the floor clean and mended the chinking between the logs. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. A brass surveyor's chain coiled on a nail by the window. His father's chain, the one he'd left in the barn. Seeing it there, polished and hung with care, sent an uncomfortable tightness through his chest. "That chain," he said. "You found it?" The girl nodded. "In the barn. Looked important, so I cleaned it up." The woman coughed, a wet rattling sound that made Clayton wince. He'd heard that sound before, 4 years back, when Thomas had scarlet fever. That same desperate struggle for air. "She needs a doctor," Clayton said. "Can't afford one." The girl's voice cracked. "We got nothing to pay with." Clayton looked at the child's threadbare dress and her mother's hollowed cheeks. He thought about the bank draft in his saddlebag, $47,000 from the Chicago cattle sale. Enough money to buy comfort for the rest of his life, or enough to save one that was slipping away. "Stay here," he said, and walked back out into the wind. The ride to town took an hour. Doc Erasmus Pike was in his surgery setting a ranch hand's broken finger when Clayton pushed through the door. "Need you at Two Creeks," Clayton said. "Woman with consumption. Bad." And Doc Pike was 67 and had seen more death than any man should. He finished wrapping the ranch hand's splint before he looked up. "Consumption don't wait for house calls, Mercer. If she's bad, moving her might kill her." "Then don't move her. I'll pay whatever it takes." Doc's eyebrows lifted. $200. Up front, medicine, steam tent, carbolic protocol, all of it. And no promises she'll make spring. $200 was 8 months' wages for a working man. Clayton pulled the bills from his coat without hesitation. "Let's go." They rode back in silence, Doc's medical bag strapped to his saddle. The wind had picked up, and snow started falling in fat, lazy flakes. By the time they reached Two Creeks, the world had gone white. Inside, the girl had added wood to the fire and wrapped her mother in every blanket she could find. Doc knelt beside the bed, pressed his fingers to the woman's wrist, and counted her pulse against his pocket watch. "Anna," the woman whispered. "My name's Anna Hartwell. This is Sadie." "Doc Pike, ma'am. Let's see what we can do." For the next hour, Clayton watched Doc work. Steam tent erected over the bed, carbolic acid mixed with water, instructions given in the calm, steady voice of a man who'd delivered bad news too many times to soften it anymore. Finally, Doc closed his bag with a soft click and gestured Clayton outside. The cold hit like a fist. Doc pulled his coat tight and spoke quietly. 3 months, maybe 6 if the Lord's merciful and we keep her warm. Consumption don't bargain, Clayton. Clayton's jaw tightened. What's she need? Medicine twice a day, steam treatments, rest, no stress. Doc paused. And hope, if you got any to spare. Through the window, Clayton could see Sadie sitting beside her mother, holding her hand. The girl's lips moved, talking or praying, he couldn't tell. "I'll take care of it," Clayton said. Doc studied him. "That's mighty charitable for a man who just found squatters on his property." "Maybe. Town's gonna talk. Let 'em." Doc mounted his horse, then paused. "You got kids, Clayton?" The question landed like a blade. "Had a son, Thomas. Died 4 years back." Doc nodded slowly, understanding passing between them without more words needed. He turned his horse toward town, and Clayton watched him disappear into the falling snow. When Clayton went back inside, Sadie was at the window, staring out at something beyond the fence line. Her whole body had gone stiff. "What is it?" he asked. She pointed. Out past the corral, barely visible through the snow, a rider sat motionless on a dark horse, watching. "That's him," Sadie whispered. "He's been coming round since before you got here. Ask questions about the property, about who owns it." The rider turned his horse and disappeared into the white. But not before Clayton got a good look at the boot prints in the snow, the same ones that had led to his door. Sunday morning broke cold and clear. Clayton helped Sadie into the wagon, Anna wrapped in blankets between them. The ride to St. Brendan's Church took 20 minutes, wagon wheels crunching over frozen ground. Anna's breathing sounded rough in the quiet, but she'd insisted on coming. "Folks need to see I'm real," she'd said, "not just gossip." The church bell rang as they pulled up. Families gathered on the steps, breath steaming in the morning air. Conversations died when Clayton climbed down from the wagon. He recognized most of them: the Hollis family who ran the general store, Samuel Chin, who owned the livery, the baker's wife, whose name he couldn't recall. All of them staring like he'd brought plague to their doorstep. Clayton helped Anna down carefully. Sadie stayed close to her mother's side, eyes down. They walked toward the church entrance. Half the congregation standing on the steps moved aside. The other half stepped back, creating a gap like Moses parting water. Clayton felt the weight of every eye, heard the whispers starting up behind cupped hands. Inside, Father Brennan Mulgrew stood at the altar arranging candles. The Irish priest was younger than Clayton by a decade, with scarred hands from his years as a railway worker before he took his vows. He looked up as they entered and nodded once. Neither welcome nor rejection, just acknowledgement. Clayton guided Anna to a pew near the back. The family who'd been sitting there, the Hollis clan, stood and moved 3 rows forward without a word. Within minutes, half the congregation had shifted. Left side of the church filled up. Right side, where Clayton sat with Anna and Sadie, stayed mostly empty except for a few stragglers who seemed too old or too stubborn to care about town politics. Father Mulgrew's sermon was about sanctuary, about the parable of the Good Samaritan. His voice echoed off the stone walls, steady and measured, but Clayton could feel the tension in the room like a physical presence. The smell of beeswax candles mixed with damp wool and too many bodies pressed close. When the service ended, Father Mulgrew didn't approach. He simply watched from the altar as families filed out, the division between them clear as a property line. Outside, the baker's wife, Mrs. Brennan, Clayton remembered now, stood near her husband's wagon. As Clayton helped Anna down the steps, Mrs. Brennan caught his eye. "We don't serve squatter sympathizers at our bakery, Mr. Mercer," her voice carried across the churchyard. "You'll have to get your bread elsewhere." Several people nodded agreement. Others looked away, uncomfortable but silent. Clayton met her stare. "Reckon I'll manage." He got Anna and Sadie back in the wagon and drove away without another word. But in the small mirror mounted on the wagon's side, he could see Sadie's face. The girl was crying, silent tears running down her cheeks while she tried to keep her mother from noticing. That afternoon, Clayton chopped firewood behind the house, working out his anger on the logs. The axe bit deep into frozen pine, and the sharp crack echoed across the empty fields. His breath came out in white clouds, and sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cold. He was stacking the split wood when he heard hoofbeats. 3 riders came up the trail. The man in front was maybe 40, well-dressed in a wool coat too fine for ranch work. His face was smooth and calculating, and he smiled like a man holding aces. "Clayton Mercer?" The man dismounted without waiting for an answer. "Virgil Cade. I believe we have business to discuss." Clayton leaned the axe against the woodpile. "Don't recall having business with you?" "Oh, but we do." Virgil pulled a folded document from his coat. "See, I've been doing some research on this property. 2 Creeks Ranch, fine piece of land. It's my land. Bought it legal 3 months back." Virgil's smile widened. "That's the interesting part. You bought it in September of '83, correct?" "That's right. From Harold Wickham. What's your point, Cade?" Virgil unfolded the document with deliberate slowness. "My point, Mr. Mercer, is that Harold Wickham didn't own 2 Creeks in September of '83, because I bought it from the Territorial Land Office in May of '81. He held up the paper. "Got the deed right here. Signatures, territorial seal, the whole works." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Clayton took the document, studying it in the fading afternoon light. It looked legitimate. Same format as his own deed, same territorial seal stamped in the corner. If you owned it since '81, why didn't you say something when Wickham sold it to me? Wasn't aware he'd done it till recently. Been working land up in Wyoming. I just got back last month and discovered this complication. Virgil took the deed back, folding it carefully. Now, I'm a reasonable man. I don't want trouble. But that's my land you're squatting on, my house you're living in, my property you've been improving. You're lying. Am I? Virgil gestured to his companions. These gentlemen were there when I registered the deed. They'll testify to it. Clayton's hands curled into fists. We can settle this at the land office. Excellent idea. Registry office in Helena, 300 miles north. Virgil glanced at the snow-heavy sky. Of course, the pass won't be clear till late April, maybe May. But I'm patient. We can wait till spring to sort out who owns what. He mounted his horse, and his companions did the same. Mighty charitable of you, Mercer, Virgil called as he turned to leave. Taking in that dying woman and her girl. Hope you got the deed to back up that charity. They rode off down the trail, and Clayton stood in the cold, watching them go. From the doorway behind him, he heard Sadie's small voice. Mr. Mercer, what's he mean about the deed? Clayton didn't have an answer that wouldn't scare her more than she already was. Doc Pike arrived 3 days later with a leather satchel full of books. He found Anna sleeping and Sadie sitting by the window, watching the road like she expected trouble to come riding up any minute. Got something for you, Doc said, settling into the chair across from her. Sadie eyed the books suspiciously. What kind of something? The learning kind. Doc opened the top volume, a medical text with illustrations of the human body. Your mama's gonna need care for a good while. Figured you might want to understand what's happening to her. I can't read much. Then I'll teach you. Doc's weathered finger traced a line of text. This here says Pthesis pulmonalis. That's the fancy Latin name for what your mama's got. Sadie leaned closer, studying the words. Her lips moved silently, sounding them out. Tysis. Good try, though. For the next hour, Clayton sat near the fire and watched Doc Pike transform from physician to teacher. The old man's patience seemed endless. Every time Sadie stumbled over a word, he'd break it into pieces, explain the Latin roots, give her tools to decode the next one. The girl soaked it up like dry ground taking rain. Pulmonalis, she read slowly. That means lungs? It does. You're a natural girl. Anna stirred on the bed, coughing wetly. Doc moved to check her pulse while Sadie fetched water. The routine had become familiar over the past week. Medicine twice daily, steam treatments when the coughing got bad, constant vigilance for fever. When Anna settled again, Doc pulled Clayton outside into the weak February sunlight. The temperature had climbed above freezing for the first time in weeks, and water dripped from the eaves. Fall spring, the ranchers called it. Ice would be back by nightfall. She's smart, Doc said. That girl, smarter than most adults I know. Noticed that. You thought about what happens if Anna don't make it? Clayton had thought about little else. Orphan train, I reckon. Unless what? Unless I do something about it. Doc studied him with those tired, knowing eyes. You ain't even known them a month, Clayton. My boy Thomas was gone 4 years before I stopped setting a place for him at dinner. Clayton's voice came out rougher than he intended. I wasn't there when he died. Was 500 miles away selling cattle, same as this time. Got back to find his grave already dug and his mama half dead from grief herself. That why you left Montana, after your wife passed? Couldn't stand being in that house, kept seeing him everywhere. Clayton looked back at the cabin, where Sadie's shadow moved across the window. Maybe that's why this feels, I don't know, like a second chance I don't deserve. Doc gripped his shoulder. Second chances don't care about deserving, son. They just show up. They stood in silence, listening to the drip of melting snow and the distant call of geese heading north. Spring was coming, whether anyone was ready or not. That night, Clayton woke to the sound of boots on the porch. He grabbed the rifle from beside his bed and moved to the window. Moonlight painted everything silver in shadow. A figure stood by the barn, barely visible in the darkness. Doing something near the door, Clayton slipped outside, bare feet silent on the frozen ground. The cold bit through his nightshirt, but he kept the rifle steady. As he got closer, he could make out more details. The figure was leaving, heading toward a horse tied beyond the fence line. Clayton reached the barn and pushed the door open. The surveyor's chain was gone. He'd hung it on the wall just yesterday, planning to use it come morning to measure the property boundaries. Now the nail held nothing but empty air, By the time Clayton ran back for his boots, the rider had vanished into the darkness. But the boot prints in the mud told him everything he needed to know. Same pattern as before, same size. Virgil Cade had been here. Clayton went back inside and lit a lamp. Sadie sat up on her pallet by the fire, rubbing sleep from her eyes. What's wrong? Someone stole my surveyor's chain. The brass one? The one you said belonged to your daddy? That's the one. Sadie's face went hard. It was him, wasn't it? That man who came by before. Mr. Cade. I reckon so. Why'd he take it? Clayton sat down heavily. Because that chain's how I measure property lines. Without it, I can't prove where Two Creeks starts and ends. Can't survey the boundaries legal-like. And if I can't prove the boundaries, I can't defend my claim against his. Sadie stood up, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She walked to the window and stared out at the barn. In the lamplight, she looked older than 9, looked like someone who'd already learned that the world didn't play fair. Then we gotta get it back, she said quietly. How do you figure we do that? I don't know yet, but Mama always says there's 2 kinds of people. Them that give up when things get stole, and them that fight to take it back. She turned to face him, and her eyes held the same fierce determination he'd seen that first day. We ain't the giving up kind, Mr. Mercer. Clayton found himself smiling despite everything. No, I don't reckon we are. Outside, the false thaw continued. Water dripped and pooled, but by morning it would all freeze solid again, and they'd wake to a world locked tight as a vault. Spring was still a long way off. Valentine's Day came with a blizzard that buried the territory under 18 inches of fresh snow. The wind howled like something alive and angry, rattling the shutters and finding every crack in the walls. Clayton spent the morning hauling firewood inside, stacking it high enough to last 3 days if the storm didn't break. By afternoon, the world had disappeared into white. Anna's fever spiked just after dark. Clayton felt her forehead and pulled his hand back like he'd touched a stove. Doc, he called. She's burning up. Doc Pike had stayed the night, sensing the storm coming. He moved quickly to Anna's bedside, pulling his stethoscope from his bag. The metal pressed against her chest, and he listened with his eyes closed, counting. 103, he said, after checking his thermometer. Maybe more. Sadie knelt beside her mother, holding her hand. Mama, can you hear me? Anna's eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. Baby girl, she whispered. So cold. I know, Mama, we're gonna get you warm. Doc worked fast. More blankets, hot water bottles wrapped in cloth, steam tent erected over the bed, carbolic acid mixing with boiling water until the room smelled like a hospital ward. Clayton stood back, feeling useless, while Sadie stayed at her mother's side. Count her breaths, Doc instructed. Tell me what you get. Sadie watched her mother's chest rise and fall, her lips moving silently. 22, she said finally. Per minute. Doc's face went grim. Too fast. Lungs are struggling. The night stretched on forever. The blizzard screamed outside, and inside, Anna fought for every breath. Clayton fed the fire, boiled water, did whatever Doc needed, but mostly he watched Sadie, watched the way she held her mother's hand, the way she whispered encouragement, the way she refused to leave even when exhaustion made her sway. Around midnight, Anna's fever broke enough for her to speak clearly. Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice barely audible over the wind. Clayton moved closer. I'm here. If I don't make spring? She coughed, a wet rattle that shook her whole body. Promise you won't let Sadie go to the orphan train. The words hit him like a fist. He'd heard about the orphan trains, seen them pass through towns, carrying children west to be distributed to families who needed workers more than they needed kids. Some found good homes, most didn't. Anna, promise me. Her fingers found his, surprisingly strong. She's smart. She deserves better than what I could give her, better than dying in some stranger's house. Clayton looked at Sadie, who'd gone very still. The girl stared at her mother, tears running silent down her cheeks. I promise, Clayton said, the words coming out rough. She stays with me. Anna's grip relaxed. Thank you. By dawn, the fever had dropped to 101. Still dangerous, but no longer immediately life-threatening. Doc packed his instruments with the careful movements of a man who'd been awake too long. She's stable, he said. For now. The blizzard blew itself out by mid-morning, leaving the world buried and silent. Clayton dug a path to the barn, his back aching from the effort. Inside, he fed the horses and checked their water. Everything was where it should be except the empty nail where his father's chain used to hang. He was walking back to the house when he heard riders approaching. 3 horses came up the trail, picking their way through the drifts. Virgil Cade rode in front, looking fresh and well-rested despite the storm. His companions were the same 2 men from before, hard-faced and watchful. "Hell of a blow," Virgil called cheerfully. "Hope your squatters survived it." Clayton stopped at the fence line. "State your business, Cade." "Just being neighborly, checking on folks after a storm." Virgil's smile never reached his eyes. "Though I suppose I should say checking on my property. This ain't your property. Registry says otherwise. Or will, come spring." Virgil leaned forward in his saddle. "But I've been thinking, Mercer, you seem like a decent man. Little misguided maybe, but decent, so I'm going to make you an offer." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet. I'll buy that deed off you, give you $8,000, what you paid for it. That way you're not out any money, you take your charity case and move on, and we forget this whole unfortunate situation." "And if I say no?" "Then we wait for spring, and the registry proves I'm right. Then you get nothing except maybe a bill for all the improvements you've made to my land." Virgil's voice hardened. "Plus, whatever legal troubles come from harboring known squatters." Clayton's hands curled into fists. "There's nothing known about Anna and Sadie except they needed help, and I gave it." Is that the story you're going with?" Virgil glanced at his companions and laughed. "Because the story-making rounds in town is a lot less noble. Rich man taking advantage of a desperate woman, keeping her dependent so she can't leave. That little girl doing all the work while you play benefactor." The words landed like physical blows. Clayton took a step forward. "You son of a—" "Careful now." Virgil's hand rested on his saddle horn, close to where a gun would be. "I'm just repeating what folks are saying. You want to be mad at someone, be mad at yourself for putting yourself in this position." He turned his horse. "Offer stands till the end of the week. After that, we do this the hard way." They rode off, and Clayton stood in the snow, breathing hard. Behind him, the cabin door opened. Sadie stepped out, still wearing the blanket from last night. "He's lying," she said. "Folks ain't saying those things." "Some of 'em probably are. Don't matter what they say. You know the truth." Clayton looked at this fierce little girl who'd already been through more than most adults he knew. "Truth don't always win, Sadie. Sometimes lies are louder." That evening, Clayton rode into town alone. The streets were mostly empty, folks still digging out from the storm. He tied his horse outside the Blue River Saloon and pushed through the doors. The warmth hit him first, then the smell of whiskey and tobacco smoke. 15 men stood at the bar or sat at tables. Conversations died when Clayton entered. Virgil Cade stood near the back, a glass in his hand and a smile on his face. "Mercer," he called out, "come have a drink." Clayton walked slowly toward him, aware of every eye in the room. "I'm here to tell you your offer ain't accepted." "Shame. I was hoping you'd be reasonable." "I'm being reasonable. You're being a thief and a liar." Virgil's smile widened. "Strong words, but I understand you're under stress. That dying woman and her girl must be quite a burden." "They ain't a burden." "No?" Virgil turned to the room. "Gentlemen, what do you think? Man spends $200 on medicine for a complete stranger, takes them into his house, lets them stay without paying rent. What does that sound like to you?" A man near the bar, someone Clayton didn't recognize, spoke up. "Sounds like a man with ulterior motives." "Or a fool," another added. Virgil pulled a coin purse from his coat, counting out bills onto the bar. $50, he announced, "to anyone who'll testify that Clayton Mercer threatened to evict Anna Hartwell and her daughter, or that he made inappropriate demands in exchange for shelter." The room went quiet. $50 was more than most of these men made in 6 months. Sheriff Thompson pushed through the door, snow still on his shoulders. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, and his eyes took in the scene immediately. "What's going on here?" "Just conversation, Sheriff," Virgil said smoothly. "Mr. Mercer and I are discussing property matters." Thompson looked at Clayton. "That true?" "He's bribing witnesses." "I'm offering compensation for honest testimony," Virgil corrected. "There's a difference." Thompson's jaw worked. "Clayton, maybe you should head home." "Not till—" "Now." The sheriff's hand rested on his gun belt. "Before this gets uglier than it already is." Clayton held Virgil's stare for a long moment, then turned and walked out. Behind him, he heard Virgil's voice carry through the open door. "Offer stands, gentlemen. $50 for the truth." The ride back to Two Creeks took an hour through the snow. By the time Clayton arrived, his anger had frozen into something harder and colder. He found Doc Pike sitting on the porch, smoking his pipe. "How is she?" Clayton asked. "Sleeping. Fever's down to 99. She might make it through the night." Doc studied him. "What happened in town?" "Town's calling me a con man or a fool. Maybe both." "Which one are you?" "Neither. But it don't matter what I am if nobody believes it." Doc knocked ash from his pipe. "You got a price to pay, Clayton. Either way this goes. Question is whether you're willing to pay it." Clayton looked at the cabin, where a single lamp burned in the window. Inside, Sadie was probably reading to her mother from one of Doc's medical books, trying to distract her from the pain. "Already paid more than I planned," Clayton said. "Might as well see it through." The false thaw returned a week later, turning the world into mud and slush. Water dripped from the eaves in a constant rhythm, and the air smelled of wet earth and manure. Sadie insisted on gathering eggs despite the mess, pulling on boots 3 sizes too big and wrapping herself in Clayton's old coat. Clayton watched from the porch as she picked her way across the yard to the chicken coop. She'd taken to naming each hen: Prudence, Margaret, Constance, Beatrice. Talked to them while she worked, her voice carrying across the muddy expanse. "Morning, Prudence. You're looking plump today. Bet you got a nice egg for me." The chickens clucked and fussed, and Sadie emerged with 4 eggs cradled carefully in her basket. She was heading back when she stopped suddenly, her head tilted like a dog hearing something distant. Clayton stood. "What is it?" "Bird." She pointed toward the creek. "Hear it?" He listened. There, a clear, fluting song cutting through the drip of melting snow. A meadowlark, back early from wherever they went in winter. Sadie's face transformed. The wariness that had become her default expression softened into something almost like joy. "Mama loved meadowlarks," she said quietly. "Said they sing hope when everything else is quiet." She stood there for a long moment, just listening. Then the song ended, and the bird flew off toward the mountains. Sadie blinked, coming back to herself, and continued toward the house. Inside, Anna was awake, but weak. Doc Pike's treatments had stabilized her, but the consumption was relentless. Good days followed by bad ones, each cycle leaving her a little more diminished. Sadie set the basket on the table and moved to her mother's bedside. "Heard a meadowlark, Mama. First one this spring." Anna managed to smile. "That's good luck, baby girl. That's what you always said?" Clayton started breakfast. Salt pork and cornmeal mush. Nothing fancy but filling. While it cooked, Sadie sat at the table working through one of Doc's books. Her reading had improved dramatically. She could puzzle through most of the Latin medical terms now, though she still stumbled over the longer words. "Mr. Mercer?" she said without looking up. "Yeah?" "If Mama dies," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "will you let me stay, or do I gotta go on the orphan train?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Clayton kept stirring the mush, buying time to find the right words. "Your mama asked me the same thing during the blizzard." "What did you tell her?" "Told her you'd stay with me, if that's what you want." Sadie's hands went still on the book. "Even if Mr. Cade takes the ranch? Even if you lose everything?" "Even then. Why?" Clayton turned to face her. "Because I know what it's like to lose a child, and I know what it's like to not be there when they needed me most. I won't make that mistake twice." Sadie's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back quickly. "Mama said you were a good man. Said she could tell by how you fixed the chimney chinking without being asked. Just needed doing. Most folks wouldn't have done it. Most folks would have thrown us out in the snow." Before Clayton could respond, they heard hoofbeats outside. He moved to the window and felt his stomach tighten. 3 riders, but not Virgil this time. The man in front was maybe 60, thin as a whip, with a white beard and eyes that had seen too much frontier justice to have much mercy left. Beside him rode a younger man carrying a surveyor's transit, and a third with a leather case that looked official. Clayton opened the door before they could knock. "Help you, gentlemen?" The older man dismounted stiffly. "Name's Abelard Finch, land assessor for the territorial office. This here's my assistant, and that's Mr. Pettigrew from the county recorder's office. We're here on behalf of Virgil Cade to conduct a preliminary survey of this property. Property's already surveyed, done when it was first registered." That was 12 years ago. Mr. Cade has requested a new survey to establish current boundaries and valuations. Finch pulled papers from his coat. We have authorization from the Territorial Land Office to conduct measurements and inspections. Clayton took the papers, scanning them. They looked legitimate, stamped and signed by officials in Helena. And if I refuse? Then we note your refusal in our report, and the territorial judge will issue a warrant allowing us access anyway. Save everyone time if you just cooperate. There was no good choice here. Refusing would look like he had something to hide. Cooperating meant letting these men crawl all over his property, looking for reasons to support Virgil's claim. Fine, Clayton said. But you stay away from the house. Woman inside sick and she don't need the stress. Finch nodded. Just need to inspect the structure. Won't take long. They spent the next 3 hours measuring, photographing, taking notes. Clayton followed them like a shadow, watching everything they did. When they got to the barn, Finch made a show of examining the walls and foundation. Notice you don't have a surveyor's chain, Finch said casually. Most property owners keep one. Had one. Got stolen. Stolen. Finch wrote something in his notebook. When? Week ago. Took it right off the barn wall. You report it? Didn't figure Sheriff Thompson would care much. Finch exchanged glances with his assistant. Interesting. Mr. Cade mentioned you might claim something like that. Said you've been making excuses for why you can't prove your property lines. Clayton's hands curled into fists. I ain't making excuses. Someone stole my chain so I couldn't survey the boundaries. Finch kept writing. And you're sure you ever had a chain? Because Mr. Cade says this property hasn't been properly maintained in years. Says when he owned it in '81, there was no surveying equipment on site. He's lying. That's a matter for the courts to decide. Finch closed his notebook. We're done here. Appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Mercer. They mounted up and rode off, leaving Clayton standing in the muddy yard. Through the window, he could see Sadie watching, her face pressed against the glass. That evening, Clayton rode to Morrison's Forge. The blacksmith shop sat at the edge of town, a low stone building with smoke pouring from the chimney. Inside, the heat hit like a wall. Sledge Morrison stood at his anvil, hammer rising and falling in a steady rhythm that sent sparks flying. Sledge was maybe 50, built like an oak stump, and hadn't spoken a word since the day he was born. But every man in the territory knew that silence didn't mean stupid. Sledge communicated just fine with his hammer. 3 quick strikes meant yes, 2 meant no, and a single heavy blow meant he was thinking. Clayton waited until Sledge finished the horseshoe he was working on. The big man plunged it into the water trough, and steam hissed up. Then he turned, wiping his hands on his leather apron. Got a problem, Clayton said. Need your help. Sledge gestured. Keep talking. Virgil Cade's claiming he owns 2 creeks, says he bought it in '81, before I did. Got a deed with the territorial seal and everything. Sledge's eyebrows rose. Thing is, I got a deed too. Same seal, same format. One of us is lying, but without the registry office open, there's no way to prove which. Sledge walked to the back of the forge and returned with 2 wooden boards. He set them side by side on his workbench and gestured, Show me both. Don't have 'em both, just mine. Sledge tapped his hammer against the anvil 3 times, then held up 2 fingers and pointed at the deeds. His meaning was clear. Bring me both deeds. You think you can tell which one's real? The big man smiled, a rare sight, and tapped the anvil once. Then he picked up a finished horseshoe and struck it with his hammer. The ring was clear and true. He picked up a cracked one and struck it. The sound was dull, wrong. You can tell by the sound, Clayton said slowly. Sledge nodded. The territorial seal, it's metal. You think if you test them both... 3 quick hammer strikes. Yes. For the first time in weeks, Clayton felt something like hope stirring in his chest. Father Brennan Mulgrew kept the church records in a stone vault beneath St. Brendan's. The vault was older than the church itself, built by French trappers decades before Montana was even a territory. Its walls were 2 feet thick and the iron door required 3 keys to open. Clayton found the priest in the sanctuary, polishing candlesticks. Late afternoon light slanted through the stained glass, painting the floor in colors that had no business existing in winter. Father, Clayton said, need to ask a favor. Mulgrew set down his cloth. I wondered when you'd come. You know what I'm going to ask? You want access to the land records. Want to see if there's any mention of Virgil Cade purchasing 2 creeks in 1881. The priest's scarred hands moved to the next candlestick. The answer is yes, you can look, but I have to be present. Fair enough. They descended stone steps into the vault. The air grew colder with each step, and the smell changed: old paper and leather, dust and time. Father Mulgrew lit 3 oil lamps, and the vault came alive with flickering shadows. The records filled floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather-bound ledgers organized by year, each containing property transfers, births, deaths, marriages, the careful notations of lives they lived and land claimed. "What you're looking for would be here," Father Mulgrew said, pulling down a ledger marked 1881. The church kept copies of all territorial land transactions, required by treaty with the federal government. He opened the book, and Clayton saw page after page of Latin text, dense and precise. Father Mulgrew's finger traced down the entries, reading silently. "Here," he said finally. "May 12th, 1881. Transaction recorded. Harold Wickham purchases Two Creeks Ranch from the Territorial Land Office. Price, $3,000. Not Virgil Cade?" No mention of him. Father Mulgrew turned more pages. "June, July, August, nothing. September through December, same. If Virgil Cade bought Two Creeks in 1881, the church has no record of it." Clayton leaned against the shelf, processing this. "So either his deed is a forgery, or he bought it through a different channel that bypassed church recording, which was illegal at the time, but not impossible." Father Mulgrew closed the ledger. "Let me check 1883. Your purchase." He pulled down another volume, found the date. March 18th, 1883, Clayton Mercer purchases Two Creeks Ranch from Harold Wickham. Price, $8,000. He looked up. "Your deed is recorded here, in Latin, in the church records, exactly as territorial law required. Can this prove anything legal? In a territorial court? Perhaps. The church records carry weight. But without access to the registry office in Helena, I can't say for certain." Father Mulgrew returned the ledgers to their shelves. "What I can tell you is that morally, the evidence supports your claim." Morally don't win in court. No, but it wins in the eyes of God, which counts for something. They climbed back up into the church proper. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow orange and pink. Father Mulgrew walked Clayton to the door. "The town's split on you," the priest said quietly. "Half think you're a saint, half think you're a fool. The other half think you're something worse." "That's 3 halves, Father." A slight smile. "The math of public opinion rarely adds up cleanly, but I'll tell you this. When the hammer falls, you'll find out who your real allies are, and sometimes that's worth more than deeds or money." Clayton rode back to Two Creeks in the gathering dark. His horse picked its way carefully through the muddy ruts, and cold rains started falling, the kind that soaked through everything and left a man chilled to the bone. He was almost home when he saw riders ahead, 4 of them, blocking the trail. Clayton's hand moved to the rifle in his saddle scabbard, but he didn't draw it, not yet. The riders moved aside, and Virgil Cade emerged from behind them. Even in the rain and fading light, his smile was visible. "Evening, Mercer. Out for a ride?" "Moving aside, Cade." "In a moment. Just wanted to let you know. Saw Father Mulgrew light up the vault this afternoon. Heard you were down there going through old records." Clayton kept his expression neutral. "Don't recall that being any of your business." "Everything concerning Two Creeks is my business. Find what you were looking for?" "Depends on what you think I was looking for." Virgil urged his horse closer. Rain dripped from his hat brim. "Here's what you need to understand, Mercer. I've been planning this for 2 years. Every detail, every contingency. You think some old Latin records in a church basement are going to change anything? If they prove you're lying, they prove nothing. Church records are copies. Copies can be incomplete. Copies can be wrong." Virgil's voice hardened. "But my deed has the territorial seal, the real seal, stamped in metal, not scribbled in a ledger by some priest who can barely read English." One of Virgil's men laughed, a mean, sharp sound. Clayton's grip tightened on his reins. "We done here?" "Almost. One more thing." Virgil pulled a folded newspaper from his coat. "Tomorrow's edition of the Helena Territorial has an interesting article about property disputes in the frontier territories. Mentions your situation specifically. Talks about wealthy men taking advantage of desperate women, using charity as a weapon, that sort of thing." He tossed the newspaper toward Clayton. It landed in the mud. "Thought you might want to read it before the whole territory does. See how your story's being told to the people who'll decide your fate come spring." Virgil turned his horse. Oh, and Mercer? That girl of yours, Sadie? Heard she's been spending time at Morrison's Forge, talking to that mute blacksmith. You might want to be careful about the company she keeps. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about her character. The threat was clear. Clayton's hand moved to his rifle. Easy now, Virgil said, still smiling. Just friendly advice. We're all going to be neighbors for a while yet. Might as well keep things civil. They rode off, and Clayton sat alone in the rain. He dismounted and picked up the newspaper. The ink was already running, but he could read the headline clear enough. Millionaire's charity or exploitation, land dispute raises questions about frontier justice. He crumpled it and threw it aside. When he got home, Sadie was at the window. She'd been watching the trail, waiting. Her face asked the question before her mouth could. Ran into Virgil, Clayton said, dismounting. He knows about the church records. Does that mean they can't help? Means we need more than Latin writing to win this fight. He looked toward Morrison's Forge, barely visible in the distance. Smoke still rose from the chimney despite the late hour. But maybe Sledge has an answer. Inside, Doc Pike was packing his bag. Anna was sleeping, her breathing steadier than it had been in days. She's improving, Doc said quietly. Fever's been gone 3 days. Cough's less frequent. She might actually make spring after all. It should have been good news, but all Clayton could think about was that even if Anna survived, they might not have a home for her to survive in. March came in cold and clear. Anna's improvement continued, slow but steady, like winter releasing its grip 1 degree at a time. She could sit up now, take a few steps around the cabin before exhaustion forced her back to bed. Doc Pike cut his visits to every other day, cautiously optimistic for the first time since the diagnosis. Clayton sat on the porch one evening, watching Sadie scatter feed for the chickens. The girl moved with easy confidence now, no longer the terrified child he'd found 3 months ago. She'd grown taller, filled out some. The haunted look had faded from her eyes. Inside, Anna was mending one of Sadie's dresses by lamplight. She worked slowly, her hands still weak, but determined. "Mr. Mercer," she said without looking up, "can we talk?" Clayton came inside, closing the door against the chill. "What's on your mind?" "If I make it through this, if I really do get better, I'll need to find work, pay you back for the medicine, the food, everything you've done." She tied off a thread and bit it clean. Doc Pike said there might be a position at the Hollis store, mending and such. Won't pay much, but it's something. You don't owe me anything. I owe you 3 months of life, maybe more. Anna met his eyes. And I owe you my daughter's future. That's a debt I can't never fully repay, but I aim to try. Anna, let me finish. She set the dress aside. I know what you're planning. Doc Pike told me about wanting to adopt Sadie if things go the way they might. And I'm grateful, more than I can say, but I need you to understand something. What's that? I ain't dead yet. Her voice was quiet but firm. And as long as I'm breathing, I'm her mother. I make the decisions about her future. Not you, not the law, not nobody else. You understand? Clayton nodded slowly. I understand. Good, because if you're serious about this, about taking her on if I don't make it, then I need to know you're doing it for the right reasons. Not because you feel guilty about your son. Not because you need someone to save so you can feel like a good man, but because you see her, really see her, for who she is. I do see her. Then tell me what you see. Clayton looked out the window at Sadie, who was showing something to the chickens. A rock or a stick, he couldn't tell. I see a girl who's braver than most grown men I've known, who learned to read Latin medical terms in 3 months because she wanted to understand what was happening to her mama, who counts your breaths every night to make sure you're still fighting, who named every damn chicken in that coop because everything deserves a name and dignity. Anna's eyes glistened. That's my girl. She's got fire in her, and brains, and more heart than this whole territory put together. Clayton turned back to Anna. If something happens to you, I won't be taking her on out of guilt or charity. I'll be taking her on because losing her would be like losing Thomas all over again, and I can't do that twice. Anna wiped her eyes. Then you have my blessing. Not my permission. That implies I'm giving her away, but my blessing, if the time comes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both still be here come summer. She picked up the dress again. Now get out of here and let me work. This hem ain't gonna fix itself. Clayton stepped outside and found Sadie sitting on the porch steps, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up at him. Heard you and Mama talking. Figured you might. You really meant what you said? About me having fire and brains and heart? Every word. She was quiet for a moment. Papa used to say I was too smart for my own good. Said it like it was a bad thing, like I should be sorry for asking questions and wanting to learn things. Your papa was wrong. I know. Mama told me that after we had to leave. Sadie picked at a splinter in the wood. Mr. Mercer, if you do adopt me, if Mama don't make it, what would I call you? The question caught him off guard. I reckon that'd be up to you. Could I call you Papa? The word hit him like a physical blow. For 4 years, no one had called him that. The title had died with Thomas, buried in that small grave back in Miles City. If that's what you want, he managed. I'd like that, when the time comes. She stood and brushed off her dress. But I hope the time don't come for a long while. I want Mama to be here too, want both of you. So do I, Sadie. So do I. That night, Clayton couldn't sleep. He lay in his bedroll listening to Anna's steady breathing and Sadie's soft snoring. Around midnight, he gave up and went outside. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows. He was standing by the corral when he smelled it. Smoke, and not from his own chimney. He turned toward town. In the distance, maybe a mile off, orange light flickered against the sky. Too big for a lantern, too contained for a prairie fire. Something was burning. Clayton saddled his horse and rode hard toward town. As he got closer, the smoke got thicker and the light brighter. People were running through the streets, some carrying buckets, others just standing and watching. St. Brendan's church was on fire. Flames poured from the windows, and the roof had already caved in on the south side. Men formed a bucket brigade from the town, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. The fire had too much of a head start. Father Mulgrew stood across the street, his face lit by the flames. Clayton rode up beside him. What happened? Don't know. I was asleep in the rectory, woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of breaking glass. The priest's voice was hollow. The vault, Clayton. The records vault. It's directly under where the fire's hottest. Clayton felt his stomach drop. The land records. Everything. Birth certificates, death records, property transfers going back 40 years. All of it. They watched in silence as the fire consumed the church. By dawn, nothing remained but smoking ruins and blackened stone. Sheriff Thompson appeared beside them, soot-streaked and exhausted. Found a broken lamp in the sanctuary. Looks like it might have been knocked over accidentally. Wasn't no accident, Father Mulgrew said quietly. You got proof of that? No, but I know arson when I see it. Thompson shook his head. Without proof, I can't do nothing. Could have been a tramp seeking shelter. Could have been a lit candle left unattended. Hell, could have been an act of God for all we know. It was Virgil Cade, Clayton said. You got witnesses, evidence, anything besides suspicion? The Latin records in that vault proved my deed was legitimate and his wasn't. Now those records are ash. You telling me that's coincidence? Thompson's jaw tightened. I'm telling you that suspicion ain't evidence. And without evidence, there ain't nothing I can do. He walked away, heading toward the smoking ruins. Father Mulgrew put his hand on Clayton's shoulder. The records might be gone, but the truth isn't. It's still written somewhere. We just have to find it. Where? The church was our best proof. Then we find another way. The priest turned to face him. Virgil made a mistake tonight. He showed his hand, showed how desperate he is. Desperate men make errors. We just have to wait for his. Clayton looked at the ruins of St. Brendan's, at the destruction of 40 years of careful record-keeping. Somewhere in the smoke and ash was the proof of his legitimate claim to Two Creeks, but proof didn't matter if no one was left to verify it. He rode home as the sun came up, the smell of smoke clinging to his clothes. Sadie was awake when he arrived, standing in the doorway with worry etched across her face. Church burned, he said, dismounting. Records vaults destroyed. Her face went pale. The Latin books? The ones that proved you were right? Gone. Then what do we do now? Clayton looked toward Morrison's forge, where smoke was just starting to rise from the morning fire. We go see Sledge, and we pray he's got an answer. Word spread through town faster than the fire had. By noon, half the territory knew about St. Brendan's, and by sunset everyone knew what it meant. Without the church records, Clayton had no proof his deed was legitimate. Just his word against Virgil's, and Virgil's word came backed by money and connections. The next morning, Sledge Morrison sent word he wanted to see both deeds. Clayton rode to the forge with his deed folded in his coat pocket. When he arrived, he found half the town already there, not inside, but gathered in the yard, standing in loose clusters like they'd come for a show. Virgil Cade stood near the forge entrance, looking confident. Sheriff Thompson leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Doc Pike was there, and Father Mulgrew, still smelling of smoke. Even Mrs. Brennan from the bakery had come, though she kept her distance from Clayton. Sledge stood at his anvil, hammer in hand. He'd swept the forge floor clean and arranged 2 wooden blocks on his workbench, side by side. When he saw Clayton, he gestured, "Both deeds. Now." "Gladly," Virgil said, pulling his document from a leather case. "Though I don't see what a mute blacksmith can tell us that the Territorial Land Office can't." Sledge's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, couldn't say nothing. He just held out his scarred hand. Virgil placed his deed on the left block. Clayton placed his on the right. The documents looked nearly identical. Same format, same legal language, same territorial seal stamped in the lower right corner. The only differences were the dates, May 1881 for Virgil's, March 1883 for Clayton's, and the names of the buyers. Sledge studied them both for a long moment. Then he picked up a small hammer, the kind he used for delicate work. The crowd pressed closer, trying to see what he was doing. He positioned Virgil's deed so the territorial seal was directly over a flat section of the anvil. Then he raised the hammer and brought it down, not hard enough to damage the paper, but hard enough that the metal seal rang out. The sound was dull, flat, wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sledge raised his hammer and struck again, same dull thud. Then he moved to Clayton's deed and did the same thing. The ring was clear and true, like a bell. It echoed through the forge and out into the yard where the townspeople stood. Sledge struck it twice more, and each time the sound was pure and clean. He set the hammer down and looked at the crowd. Then he pointed at Virgil's deed and shook his head. He pointed at Clayton's and nodded. "What the hell does that prove?" Virgil demanded. "So one seal rings different than the other. Could be age, could be wear, could be anything." Sledge picked up a piece of paper he'd prepared earlier and held it up for everyone to see. On it, he'd drawn 2 simple diagrams. One showed bronze, the metal used for territorial seals before 1882. The other showed brass, the cheaper alloy introduced after budget cuts in late 1882. He pointed to the bronze diagram, then to Clayton's deed, then he pointed to the brass diagram, then to Virgil's deed. Father Mulgrew stepped forward, his voice carrying across the yard. The territorial government changed the composition of official seals in October 1880 due to budget constraints. Before that date, all seals were cast in bronze. After that date, they were cast in brass. The sound difference is distinct. Bronze rings true, brass sounds dull. "That's fascinating," Virgil said, his voice tight. "But it don't prove nothing. My deed is dated May 1881. Of course it has a bronze seal." "Does it?" Father Mulgrew moved closer. "Because if your deed is truly from 1881, it should have a bronze seal. But according to Sledge's test, it has a brass seal, which didn't exist until 1882, a full year after you claimed to have purchased the property." The crowd erupted in whispers. Virgil's face went red. "This is ridiculous. You're trusting the word of a man who can't even speak? Who communicates by banging on metal like some kind of animal?" The whispers stopped. The crowd went silent. Sledge Morrison set down his hammer very slowly. He walked toward Virgil, and despite being 6 inches shorter, he seemed to loom over the other man. The fury in his eyes was articulate enough. Sheriff Thompson pushed off the wall. "That's enough, Cade. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying, and you're wrong." Thompson moved between them. "I've known Sledge for 20 years. He's forgotten more about metalwork than you'll ever know. If he says one seal is brass and the other is bronze, I believe him." "Fine, believe him, but that don't make it legal proof." Virgil grabbed his deed off the anvil. "You want to know the truth? I'll tell you the truth. I paid good money to have that seal replaced after the original one got damaged in a flood. Had it done in Helena in '83, right before I came back to Montana. That's why it's brass instead of bronze. Completely legal." The explanation came too quickly, too smooth, like he'd been preparing it. "You had the seal replaced," Clayton said slowly. "The seal that proves the deed's authentic. The one thing that can't be forged. It wasn't forged. It was repaired." "By who?" "A clerk in Helena. I don't remember his name." "Convenient." Virgil's eyes flashed. "You want to call me a liar? Fine. But come spring, when that registry office opens, my deed will be on file and yours won't. Then we'll see who's lying." He stormed toward his horse. His 2 companions followed, but Clayton noticed they kept their distance. like they weren't sure which side to be on anymore. When Virgil was gone, the crowd began to disperse. But they dispersed differently than they'd arrived. Quieter, more thoughtful. Clayton saw Mrs. Brennan talking to her husband in low tones, saw the way they glanced at him without the open hostility from before. Doc Pike approached, his medical bag in hand. That was well done. Wasn't me, was Sledge. Still, you're winning people over, slowly, but it's happening. Sledge appeared beside them, wiping his hands on his apron. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, Clayton's breath caught, his father's surveyor chain. The brass links gleamed in the afternoon light. "Where'd you find this?" Clayton asked. Sledge pointed toward town, then made a gesture like someone riding. Then he pointed at Sadie, who had just arrived with Anna in the wagon. "Sadie found it," Clayton said, understanding. "Where?" The girl climbed down from the wagon, her face determined. "In Mr. Cade's saddlebag, night of the fire. I saw him riding away from the church, so I followed him to the saloon. When he went inside, I checked his horse. Chain was wrapped in a blanket hidden under his bedroll." "You took it?" "I took back what was ours." Sadie's chin lifted. "He stole it first." Anna put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "She told me this morning. I said she should have told you sooner, but she wanted to wait till the time was right. Wanted to make sure we had witnesses." Clayton looked at the chain in his hands, feeling the weight of it. 3 generations of Mercers had used this chain to measure their land, to establish their boundaries, to prove what was theirs. Now it was back where it belonged. Sheriff Thompson stepped forward. "Miss Sadie, you're saying you saw Virgil Cade riding away from the church the night of the fire?" "Yes, sir. About midnight. He had soot on his coat." "And this chain was in his possession?" "Yes, sir. Hidden like he didn't want nobody to see it." Thompson looked at Clayton, then at the chain, then back at Sadie. "That's interesting testimony from a 9-year-old girl." "She ain't lying," Anna said quietly. "My daughter don't lie." "I'm not saying she is. I'm saying a good lawyer could tear that testimony apart in court. A child at night, at a distance, identifying a man she's only seen a handful of times." Thompson shook his head. "It ain't enough for an arrest warrant." "But it's enough for doubt," Father Mulgrew said. "And doubt is where truth begins." The stagecoach from Helena arrived on April 28th, 2 days before the registry deadline. Clayton was in town buying supplies when he heard the driver calling out mail delivery at the post office. He wasn't expecting anything, but something made him walk over anyway. The postmaster, a wizened man named Gifford, sorted through the leather bags with deliberate slowness. "Mercer," he called out, "got something here for you, official looking." Clayton's heart hammered as he took the envelope. Territorial Land Office seal. Unbroken. He tore it open right there on the street. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a letter from the territorial recorder. "Mr. Clayton Mercer, your inquiry regarding property deed verification for Two Creeks Ranch has been processed. Our records confirm the following. March 18, 1883, Clayton Mercer purchased Two Creeks Ranch from Harold Wickham. Deed recorded, territorial seal, bronze, pre-1882 issue, verified authentic. Registration fee paid in full, May 12, 1881. Harold Wickham purchased Two Creeks Ranch from Territorial Land Office. No record exists of subsequent sale to Virgil Cade or any other party prior to your purchase. Additionally, investigation reveals territorial seal number 847, brass post-1882 issue, reported missing from Helena office in October 1883. If you possess a deed bearing this seal number, please contact law enforcement immediately. The deed presented by Mr. Virgil Cade, examined by our office via photographic copy, bears seal number 847. Clayton read it twice to make sure he wasn't dreaming. Then he mounted his horse and rode straight to the sheriff's office. Thompson was at his desk, working through paperwork. He looked up when Clayton entered, saw his face, and reached for his gun belt. "Registry confirmed?" he asked. "Confirmed. And more." Clayton handed him the letter. Thompson read it slowly, his expression darkening. When he finished, he stood and buckled on his gun. "Where's Cade now?" "Don't know. Haven't seen him since the forge." "Then we'll find him." Thompson grabbed his hat. "This is enough for an arrest warrant. Fraud, forgery, and theft of government property. That brass seal he's got is stolen." They found Virgil at the saloon, drinking alone at a corner table. He looked up when they entered, and something in his face said he'd been expecting this. "Virgil Cade," Thompson said formally. "You're under arrest for land fraud, forgery of territorial documents, and possession of stolen government property." Virgil didn't resist. He just smiled, that same calculating smile Clayton had seen too many times. "Registry confirmed Mercer's deed, did it?" "It did." "Interesting timing. 2 days before the deadline. Virgil stood slowly, letting Thompson put the handcuffs on, almost like someone greased the right palms to speed things along. "The only palms that got greased were yours," Thompson said, "when you bribed that clerk in Helena to forge your seal." "Can't prove that." "Don't need to. Got written confirmation the seal on your deed is stolen government property. That's enough to put you away for 5 years, minimum." As Thompson led him toward the door, Virgil stopped beside Clayton. "You think you won. You didn't win anything. You just survived. There's a difference." "Maybe, but surviving's enough." They took Virgil to the territorial marshal's office to await trial. Clayton stood outside, watching, feeling the weight of 3 months lift from his shoulders like snow sliding off a roof. Father Mulgrew appeared beside him. "Justice served. Some of it. The church will be rebuilt. The records are gone, but we'll start new ones, better ones." The priest paused. "And you're staying at Two Creeks?" "If Anna and Sadie want me to." "I think they do." Clayton rode back to the ranch as the sun set. The air smelled different, warmer, richer. The creek was running free now, ice completely melted. Green shoots pushed through the mud where grass would soon grow. He found Anna sitting on the porch, a blanket around her shoulders. She'd walked outside by herself for the first time in weeks. "Registry confirmed," Clayton said, dismounting. "Virgil's arrested. It's over." Anna closed her eyes. "Thank God." "Where's Sadie?" "Gathering eggs. She'll be back soon." Anna looked at him. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to live. Really live, not just survive." "Mr. Mercer, Clayton, I need to tell you something. Doc Pike says I'm going to make it. Says the consumption's in retreat. I'm not cured, might never be fully cured, but I'm going to live. At least long enough to see Sadie grow up." The news should have been purely joyful, but Clayton heard the question beneath it. If Anna lived, if she could work again, if she could provide for Sadie herself, what did that mean for his promise? "That's good news," he said carefully. "It is, but it don't change what we talked about you and Sadie." Anna's voice was firm. "She needs a father, a real one, not just a man letting her stay out of charity. And you need a family. We both know it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this ranch is big enough for all of us. I'm saying Sadie calls you Papa in her sleep now. I'm saying you look at her like she's your own." Anna met his eyes. "I'm saying we could make this work, not as charity, not as debt, but as family. Real family." Before Clayton could respond, Sadie came around the corner with her egg basket. She stopped when she saw them, reading something in their faces. "What happened?" "Registry confirmed Clayton's deed," Anna said. "Mr. Cade's going to jail. We get to stay." Sadie set down the basket and ran to Clayton. He caught her in a hug, and she wrapped her arms around his neck like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "I knew you'd win," she whispered. "I knew it." Over her shoulder, Clayton saw Anna smiling, and beyond her, the first meadowlark of true spring landed on the fence post and began to sing. Now folks'll tell you money can fix most troubles. Clayton Mercer learned different that winter of 1884. He'd ridden up to Two Creeks with $47,000 in his saddlebag and a deed to land he'd never seen. Figured he'd bought himself a quiet place to retire, maybe raise some cattle, live out his years in peace. What he found instead was a dying woman, a fierce little girl, and a fight that money couldn't win. The legal adoption came through in May. Judge Morrison, no relation to Sledge, signed the papers making Sadie Hartwell into Sadie Mercer. Anna stood beside them both, tears running down her cheeks, healthy enough to witness her daughter getting the father she deserved. They planted an apple tree over the spot where Anna had lain closest to death, there, in that makeshift bed of flour sacks. Clayton wrapped his father's surveyor chain around the base of the sapling, brass links gleaming in the spring sun. "This chain measured 3 generations of Mercer land," he told Sadie. "Now it protects yours." By summer, even Mrs. Brennan was bringing pies to their Sunday dinners. The whole town came. Doc Pike, Father Mulgrew, Sledge Morrison, with his hammer hanging from his belt, like always. They'd gather around the table Anna had scrubbed clean that first desperate week, and they'd eat and laugh and tell stories about the winter they all survived together. 3 years later, the apple tree bloomed for the first time. Sadie was 12 by then, reading medical texts in Latin and teaching the younger children at the new church school. Anna worked part-time at the Hollis store, her lungs scarred but functional, her spirit unbroken. And Clayton? He sat on that porch most evenings, watching Sadie tend the garden Anna had planted where wild weeds used to grow. The meadowlarks came back every spring, nesting in the apple tree, singing hope when everything else was quiet. He never did get rich off Two Creeks Ranch, But he got something better. He got to be the father he couldn't be for Thomas. He got a second chance he didn't deserve, but accepted anyway. And Sadie, fierce, brilliant, brave Sadie, she got two parents who'd walk through a blizzard for her. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned to buy. They're the ones that find you in the cold and the dark, crying beside their dying mama, asking for mercy you didn't know you had left to give. And if you're lucky, if you're paying attention when the moment comes, you say yes to the life you never knew you needed, and you let it save you right back.